I was sent this post from the 2Xchromosome subreddit, and it really drives home the fact that women have got to decenter men's opinions. Stop worrying about how they are critiquing women or how they are giving head pats to other women, because it's not usually in a positive way anyway. It's to control women, it's to triangulate women against women, it's to pit women against women in any types of way that they're using critiques or compliments. So let's get into this post. This woman says, struggling to feel sympathy for my friend who complains about male attention. Okay, her post. I have a friend who receives a lot of male attention. She's conventionally attractive and very social, and because of it, men just naturally like her a lot. She always complains about how they're always flirting or interested in her, and I just find it so hard to feel any sympathy for her. All my life, men have told me I'm extremely ugly, gagged at the sight of me, catcalled me as a joke because I'm ugly, and even told me that I'm only good for being raped. My friend has tried to talk about how much she hates how men like her so much, but I can't bring myself to feel sympathy for her. I know it's wrong and I should, but I can't help but think I would love to be treated like that if men had to treat me anyway at all, if they couldn't just ignore me. It feels like it's really putting a strain on how I feel about her, because she's always talking about how hot she is and complaining about male attention. Meanwhile, I'm constantly reminded of how ugly I am by men. My friend has tried to talk about how much she hates how men like her so much, but I can't bring myself to feel sympathy for her. I know it's wrong and I should, but I can't help but think I would love to be treated like that if men had to treat me anyway at all, if they couldn't just ignore me. It feels like it's really putting a strain on how I feel about her, because she's always talking about how hot she is and complaining about male attention. Meanwhile, I'm constantly reminded of how ugly I am by men. So I feel like there's a lot going on in this short post. This woman absolutely has the right to feel negatively about how these men treat her. They criticize her, they're insulting, and it absolutely makes sense that she is sour on that. But this is the reason why decentering men's opinions, criticisms, all of that is so important, because she's looking at her friend and saying she is attractive, she is getting attention. I would like that attention, and thinking that that attention is good attention, when women who are attractive can be dehumanized and are dehumanized by men's compliments as well, because a lot of the times these men simply want women for their bodies. It's not like they're wanting women because they want to, really love and support on women. So it's like, once you are able to decenter their validation one way or another, their critiques, their compliments, all of that, it'll be a lot easier to be able to talk to other women. She is souring on her friend because of how men treat both of them, despite the fact that they're being treated differently, obviously, but they're not being treated well. No, neither of them are being treated well, but obviously she's being treated worse. But we don't even really know how this other woman is feeling in this. Does she even know that her supposed friend, is feeling so negatively about her? So all of this just seems like a whole mess. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor in any way, but it just seems like she's going to have to unravel how she feels about men and seeking their attention or their compliments, and how it is wrapping up in her relationship with this other woman that may not even know and understand that her supposed friend dislikes her because of how men are treating her negatively. Like somebody that understands or knows what's going on will have to clue us in on what kind of situation this is. Let's look at some of these comments though. Zeno Moose says, it may help to keep in mind that the more positive attention she's getting doesn't actually feel any safer. It's just dangerous in a different way. And to that, Bryzelbub says, right, it's good to remember it's from the same type of men with the exact same feelings or opinions towards OP and other or most women. It's the other side of the same coin. You don't want this attention from these men, OP, no matter what it looks or sounds like, I promise. And that's what I'm thinking as well, because do you want insults or do you want to be dehumanized by their compliments? I don't think that either is amazing. I don't think that attractive women want to constantly be dehumanized simply for their looks. I don't think. You'll have to weigh in on what you think. But Deep Classroom says one will have an easier time in life. I think an honest conversation about looks privilege is in order. And I think that we can have that conversation about looks privilege. I think that we can, beauty privilege and all of that. But using that as a reason to feel some kind of way towards your friend, even though it's because of these men and their comments, I think that you have to separate the two to have the honest conversation. Because like I was saying before, this friend probably doesn't even know that this woman is feeling negative about her. And then Kitten at the bottom says, I disagree. Are you missing the part where OP has men saying the only thing she's good for is being raped? That's terrible. That is a mess. It's insulting, it's dangerous, it's threatening, and it makes her feel negative. That is true, but that type of thing should be like the vitriol, the anger should be directed at the men and not the men that are giving her friend compliments. It's like that's the reason why I said we can have these discussions, but we have to separate the two things, because the anger, the vitriol, all of that needs to go towards those men who say these atrocious things to that woman. That is not right at all. Claimed Beauty says, when I was younger, I was thin and conventionally attractive. This led to a lot of attention from men, which sounds great in theory, but when you have a guy chase you down the sidewalk to ask for your phone number, it can get scary pretty quick. You're both getting attention from men, just very different ways, but none of it's good. Having guys tell you you're ugly and unattractive sucks, and it's hurtful. Having a guy bother and harass you all night because he wants access to your body, because he finds you attractive and thinks he's entitled to it, also sucks and is scary. You're both going through two very different versions of the same thing, which is bad behavior from men. And here's the OP saying, it's not just hurtful, it's also scary. I literally have men joking I'm so ugly that the only way they'd want me is to be raped. Are you saying men openly joking about people raping me isn't scary? And I don't think that she was even remotely saying that at all. And so this is the reason why it's like you have got to put the focus on the men and their bad behavior and not the women. It's the men that are the ones that are behaving badly. It's not the friend that's getting the supposed positive comments, because even the attractive ones are getting commentary or getting chased down and harassed by men. But nobody is trying to downplay the insults or the threats or any of this from the OP. But I think that she is putting the onus on the women. I think she's putting it in the wrong direction. That's what I'm seeing. You would need to weigh in. I'm going to end with Xenomoose. Xenomoose says, of course it is. It's incredibly scary. Your friend is probably dealing with a different version of this, one in which men take her no as a challenge and try to force themselves on her anyway. Some of them probably succeed to some degree. Even when the situation doesn't turn physical, she's probably constantly aware that it could because it has so many times before. I think it's easy to imagine that the male attention women like this receive is always respectful and sweet, but it's not. Even when it starts that way, it can quickly turn aggressive and ugly if the woman expresses even polite disinterest. I'm not saying this because I want to turn it into a competition, but because you genuinely seem to want to sympathize with your friend, and you can't do that unless you understand. And I'm going to leave it there. This is not, I don't know all the answers for everything. And that's the reason why we continue to have these conversations. But I don't think that either of these sides of the coin is positive for women. The negativity, the insults, or even the compliments, which can lead to aggressive behavior if you say no, because some of these people don't accept no. They don't care about boundaries. They still come at attractive women, and attractive women get harmed just like unattractive women get harmed because they dehumanize women in general. Let me know what you think. Join the conversation. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. Just yesterday, I was reading an inbox from a woman who was talking about how her mother had her dreams of being a ballerina stripped away from her because she had to become a caretaker early on. And that led me into this diatribe of how I feel so angry that children, like little girls especially, how their childhood gets stolen from them and how they have to become these secondary parents. And so the woman, she jumped back into my inbox and she said this. She says, Burb, just saw your post on YouTube that includes my mother's story. Thank you so much. I'm in tears. I also want to say something in my grandmother's defense. She didn't choose to have so many children or push them on my mother. She had no control over birth control or her own body and had no choice but to create help where she could. She wasn't the eldest in her family, but she still ended up co-parenting 21 siblings with her sisters and mother. Then she had to contend with all her own babies, and those weren't the ones that she lost during childbirth or early death. That kind of life wasn't about fictional trad life everyone's romanticizing. It was about survival without options. And I agree with you. We really need to move away from the idea of the trad daughter, where girls are expected to give up their childhood to raise siblings or sacrifice their adult years caring for parents who didn't take care of themselves or create a plan for their later years. That's not tradition. It's unpaid labor passed down through generations of women who deserve better. I'm so grateful that by the time my mother came along, things had changed enough to give her the agency to eventually leave her marriage to my father and the ability to care for and advocate for herself. She was able to keep herself man-free and own her own little house. At least that's something. If it weren't for advances like birth control, the right to open a bank account, and the ability to own property, I might have ended up in the same place. And that's a sobering thought. It makes me shudder when I think of my nieces and what they're in for if things continue to crumble. We can't let that happen. I hope you keep receiving more stories. There's so much whitewashing of those old-time marriages, and the reality of what our mothers and grandmothers lived through deserves to be heard. You're doing such powerful work. I used your post to inoculate me against self-gaslighting myself into the same old self-sabotaging patterns. I also send some of your story times to my nieces. They're in their late teens to early 20s, talented and beautiful, just the kind of young women these MFs are looking for. The patriarchy is against women gossiping because they don't want women to share their stories and become less susceptible to their BS. I hope you don't mind that I call you the gossip queen. It's only in my mind and heart. To me, gossip is censored truth. When she sent this, I said, oh my goodness, I should have been more empathetic to Granny. I know better. I know history. I know women didn't have choices. There was no such thing as even marital rape. Women couldn't say no. There was no birth control. But it really does drive home the fact that what feminism has won for us, we're autonomous humans now. We can say no. We can use birth control. We can decide if and when at all we have children. We can have bank accounts and create our lives. And that's where women are right now, and why some of us are so vocal on not wanting to go backwards. I'm glad that she sent this because I was angry. I was angry at the dreams that her mother was stripped away. That was stripped away from her mother. But also now you have to remember that her granny didn't have a life either. Her granny was a broodmare because men decided that that was all women were supposed to be used for. So we have to have empathy for all of these women that are just doing the best that they can to do to survive. Right now, we get to survive and thrive, and we have got to use the powers that we have right now, share these stories, talk about this so that we can not take it for granted. the rights and freedoms that we have right now so that we don't go back to that time where our grandmothers and mothers and great grandmothers had no rights and no freedoms and couldn't choose what to do with our own bodies. All right, y'all, join the conversation. Let me know if you have any stories that you want to share regarding your mothers, your grandmothers, your great grandmothers, whatever we need to know so that we can continue to tell their stories, because sometimes their stories, sometimes they were silenced, but we're not going to be silenced. So jump in, join the conversation. I've talked about the tradwife to poverty pipeline. I've talked about how women need to have a plan B, C, D, E, F, G, elemental P, all of the plans, because you just really don't know. Now, this Am I the A-hole post is from the man's perspective. He is ready to discard his stay-at-home wife. He says, am I the a-hole for divorcing my wife and not wanting to give her half after she said I wasted her time? He's 32, she's 28. He says, I have been married to my wife for 6 years. We met when she was 21 and I was 25. We dated for about a year before getting married. Things were good for a long time, but in the past 2 years, I started realizing we'd grown into very different people. We want different things, have different priorities, and to be completely honest, the love I felt for her has slowly faded. I didn't cheat, I didn't lie, I just fell out of love. This is one of the main reasons why I want women to get their education in their 20s and not get married so young. When you get married so young, you're not fully who you're going to be. And now there are different people because you're completely different from who you are when you're in your early 20s to by the time you're your late 20s. But let me get back to this man's post. I tried to communicate. We did therapy. I gave it time, but eventually I came to the conclusion that staying married would just be delaying the inevitable, and it wouldn't be fair to either of us. So I told her I wanted a divorce. She was understandably upset, but then things escalated. She said I wasted her time and that I used up her good years only to leave her. She now wants half of everything, the house, my retirement account, investments, even though she didn't contribute much financially. She's been in and out of work, and I've been the primary earner for most of the marriage. We signed a prenuptial agreement before we got married. It was fair. She had her own lawyer. There was no pressure, and it clearly laid out what would happen if we ever split. It protects the assets I brought into the marriage, and it doesn't entitle either of us to spousal support unless certain conditions are met, which aren't. Now she's saying the prenup shouldn't matter because I emotionally conned her into a dead-end marriage and wasted her youth. That even though it's legally binding, morally, I should give her half because I took her best years and gave back nothing. I don't see it that way. I loved her when we married. I was faithful. I supported her emotionally and financially. I tried everything to make it work. Falling out of love isn't a crime, and I don't think I should be punished for something I didn't do maliciously. Am I the a-hole for sticking to the prenup and not giving her half just because she says I wasted her time? So this woman is 28, and obviously she doesn't have any work history. He doesn't say whether or not she went to college or not. And so now, she's still young enough to where she can rebuild and start over, but now she's going to have to do that from scratch, which is the reason why I say women need to have a sense of self-preservation, because these men could, like he said, he fell out of love with her, and that's not a crime to fall out of love. And now he's just basically discarding her, and she has to figure out her life from square one. This is one of the main reasons why I say that you need a foundation before you do something as risky as staying home and not having any kind of work history. It is a terrible thing to have to start over. She's starting over at 28. Some women have to start over at 40. Some women have to start over at 50 when they get discarded. And they do get discarded. Men see women as something that is disposable. We are a wife appliance. And once they get tired of, playing with that wife appliance and they want to upgrade or they just want to discard it, they can do whatever they want to because they are not bought into our humanity. And women need to know and understand that. Get that through your brain. Stop thinking thinking that this is all going to be a fairy tale and have some kind of sense of self-preservation, that you want to be able to survive and thrive regardless of your marital status. Some of these comments. Winifred Brooks says, I don't understand. You said your prenup protects the assets you brought into the marriage. Totally understandable, but that has zero to do with the assets acquired during the marriage. It's pretty standard to split marital assets 50-50. That has nothing to do with how either of you feel about the situation. And then Playful Ganache says, he also said he fell out of love. And then this person copied and pasted one of the OP's comments. All right, it says, he also says he fell out of love. And here's the OP, and the OP made this comment in the post somewhere. We don't have any kids, but we did have a stillborn 2 years ago, and her name isn't on the house, and she did the housework. I don't think she deserves half at all because she didn't contribute anything financially. The thing about the whole premise of this subreddit is an a-hole will often deliberately lie or leave out crucial information to make them come off as better. And that is absolutely true. And I keep saying this, men are not reliable narrators. He left out the whole that they had a stillborn, and that was 2 years ago. And it seems like they started having issues 2 years ago. Seems like a coincidence, or maybe not. I don't know. You can weigh in on that part. But this also goes to show that men do not value women's unpaid labor. They say that women don't, he says she didn't financially contribute anything. Even if she was cooking, cleaning, doing the housework, all that kind of stuff, that means absolutely nothing. Vita Versailles says, she washed my clothes, cleaned my messes, and cooked my food, but didn't contribute anything to the household. And then Zach's Best Puppy says, and she lost a baby, so she's not as fun as she used to be. And then Please Send Cute Cat says, that's exactly his vibe, laughing my butt off. Man, this guy's a giant douche. And then Judgmental Al says, he's worse. He's an effing monster. On top of not supporting his wife, the woman he's supposed to love and cherish unconditionally, he also left her off the deed to the house he bought before marriage, according to another comment. The audacity of this piece of is unbelievable. Okay, so here's where the OP chimed in with that comment that I just read. We don't have any kids. We had a stillborn 2 years ago. So that's where he made that comment. And to that, Avira says, legally, that doesn't matter. She took care of the house, which means you didn't have to. That's how the two of you chose to split the labor. You've heard the saying, time is money. How much time did she save you and not having to cook, clean, or do laundry? How much of your time was freed up by her taking on these chores? Likewise, how much of her time was taken up by doing these things? Sure, you could have both worked and then split the chores, but then you have less time. So this woman, Avira, is really trying to speak to this man in a way that makes sense. But I do not believe that these men care about all of these questions. So it's like a waste of free data to even type this stuff up. All right, she says, her labor may not have resulted directly in cash, but it absolutely lightened your load significantly. She continues with, which is why the courts do not care where the paychecks came from. Your marriage is more than just who makes the money. When you get married, you agree that all future assets are joint assets, specifically because of situations like this where one person takes over working and one takes over caring for the household. You agreed to all this when you married her. That commitment doesn't go away just because you decided you're done. When you signed that wedding certificate, you promised her half of what is yours for the rest of your marriage, and she did the same. You piled your assets together. When the marriage ends, you each get to leave with half. I hope she gets a good lawyer because it sounds like you're going to try to screw her over. And then the man said, I didn't come here asking for legal advice because I don't need it. My lawyer basically says she's not going to get anything in the divorce. I came here asking for an opinion. My opinion is, yes, you're totally the a-hole for how you're treating this woman. But regardless, like he said, he has an airtight prenup. She probably won't get anything. And that's not even the point I want to make. My point is, women, This is how these men could screw you over. And you have no experience as far as a career goes. You have no education. This is how you could literally get screwed. So don't do this to yourself. Have some sense of self-preservation, like I keep saying, and make sure that you have a foundation to where even if you take some time out of the workforce, that you can go back into the workforce if necessary so that you can survive and thrive, like I keep saying, regardless of if you're married or not. All right, y'all, join the conversation. Let me know what you think about this one. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.
I'm going to say something controversial, and your cognitive dissonance would deactivate your critical thinking the moment that you feel triggered. I am not trying to offend you, but offense can be a catalyst for change. So if you find yourself upset, fuck you. No, I'm joking. Self-reflect. The black church is a plantation. The black church is a plantation. The black church is a plantation. The black church, tell your mom, is a plantation. I know. I just punched you in the chest. Mwah. Kiss on your forehead. I swear to God, I love you. But the black church is a plantation.